Works a little bit better when you have it pointing in the right direction. Hi, everybody. It's an exhausting day. I was thinking about this. We've had supposedly a short week because it's supposed to be a holiday. It has felt like the longest week in history. So, stay tough, stay strong. I apologize for being late, but like you guys still had a few things to do. Ted's running late. They're on 12-hour shifts, and we all know what, hurricane procedures are like. So I appreciate your patience on this. Not a whole lot changed at 8 o'clock. So let me show you what I'm looking at this point, and you guys, tell me what you're thinking. It kind of did the same thing. We saw something that was a little bit different at 5 o'clock. Hey, Frankie, I miss you. You have to sing with Jonathan. I think that you guys are going to come up with a new song here. So here's the center of Irma, right there, kind of riding up the spine of Cuba. There's a lot of interaction going on. And the reason I'm going to tell you guys that, I'm going to show you the satellite here, right? So there's the center. Now here's the outline of Cuba. There's the island. Look at that. It's been mostly moving west. So there's the west motion, but that eye is almost sitting right there along the coast. So there's a lot going on with the interaction between the eye wall. That's that red area. And then, of course, the island there. So I think that's maybe helping in order to either dry it out a bit, because it's going to sweep in some of the drier air across the land. And, of course, the friction there is actually going to help to slow down the winds. Or at least that's what we're hoping at this point. So what you're seeing, you got the grid on here. I'm going to take it off and show you what you're missing. Here's the clean view. All right, so... Well, Angie, I'm looking at Cuba now, too, and I think we're just going to have to hope for the best here, because look at this. The only place that is escaping right now is the extreme northwestern side of the island, so everybody else is getting it. And, I mean, this is hard and this is long-lasting. So, and the winds are going to change direction, plus it's going to keep moving toward the northwest, which means the rest of the island is going to get it. So, I don't know where they're going to go. I mean, all they can do is kind of stay there and really hope for the best. All right, so now you got the grids on here. That's the latitude and longitude. If you follow a line to the west, that's due west. All right, so the eye doesn't move due west, does it? It seems to wobble a bit, and I've been cautioning you guys about watching that and saying, oh, it's going to move on to Cuba, it'll die. No, it'll skip around. You know, the land interacts, and it kind of nudges it in a direction one way or the other. So it's still moving overall west. In fact, the Hurricane Center didn't change anything with respect to the motion. So here's what they've got, right? Here's the 8 o'clock advisory. Still winds 155. That didn't change. There's your west motion at 12. I've really been trying to hope for that west motion at 12 would kind of start shifting more northwest, like eliminate the westerly component completely. That would tell me there's a turn, but we're not seeing it, so it's not turning yet, but this is what we're watching. So right now, still moving toward the west. The eye is brushing up against Cuba now, so it's a bit of a wobble, but it's not a motion change. It's just kind of hitting it and probably bouncing off a little bit. And you got to imagine that there's got to be something happening there that's going to impact it. But we think it's going to still keep going that way. So that's generally, it's not due west, it's not northwest, it's just slightly north of west, but there it is. So it keeps going up the backside of Cuba. Now, here are the keys, and of course you start to interact with the straits. It's really warm water, and the Hurricane Center is still thinking at this point. It kind of pushes ashore on the southwest side of the peninsula. Amanda, I know you guys are battening down. I'm really hoping for good outcomes for everybody here. Sandra, I'm really thinking of your mom and your dad and my cousin that's over in Panama City too, but I think you guys up here in the Western Panhandle are going to be in much better shape. But watch this. Let's play it out. They show M in the center. M in the center means major hurricane. So we don't think it's going to have a whole lot of weakening. It should still be, major hurricane, and major means it's packing 111-mile-an-hour winds or better. And still, it's 155 now, so, it's still close to land, and there's not a whole lot of weakening, at least at this point, that we have seen. So it pushes ashore as a major hurricane, but now it's over land. Now, it's not a lot of land. It's not really a thick part of the peninsula. There's not a lot of land on either side, and, it's a big hurricane. So there it is. It's really, really large. I think we're all going to pray for the best here at this point. You've got something that almost fills in one of these squares, and, we've been talking about nearly 400 miles across, So it's really about 370, but that's neither here nor there. In the inside, that red area, that's the eye wall. That's where your hurricane force winds are. A little more than 100 miles across. So let's take one of the squares and move it. Let's take one of these squares. That's about the size of the hurricane. Let's move it. If we move it up, even if it stays across the middle of the peninsula, it's going to cover from east coast to west coast the entire peninsula. Now, the only thing we have working for us is, as it moves up, you've got dry air coming in because a lot of the right-hand side is going to be across the land. And in addition, land tends to slow things down, so there should be some friction. So what I noticed at 5 o'clock was, the Hurricane Center kept saying, major hurricane, major hurricane, major hurricane, and it wouldn't be less than a hurricane until it hit Georgia. Now, look carefully here. Major hurricane, and then all of a sudden you see the S at the state line. Well, S means tropical storm. So their models now are suggesting that there's going to be a little bit of a drying impact. There should be a weakening of the wind. And as it heads this way, we're going to see, hopefully, a system that starts to weaken considerably. So let's play it out. Let's say it keeps this position. And I've been cautioning you guys about watching this top head. It stays 4 and 5, and it's typically about a 200-mile error. So let's ignore that temporarily. If we play it out where this is going to be pretty accurate, even if it goes on either side of this cone, this is closer to, of course, the Jacksonville area, and then on the left side or the west side, yeah, that's right over us. But if we play it out the way they have it in the center, we're on the cusp of this thing, but, we're talking wind, we're talking rain. So how much are we talking? All right, I got some graphics here for you. All right, there's rainfall. Rainfall shouldn't be our biggest issue. Rainfall amounts are going to be heaviest here across South Florida. The red here suggests maybe 10 to 15 inches. This is really where it's coming in at its strongest, so it's got full intensity, full force, and you've got, an incredibly strong eye wall at this point. So you've got the really heavy rain, and the way it's coming in, you're going to see the heaviest right here. It's basically across the lower third of the peninsula. This is all offshore. Moves up. There may be some spots that don't have quite as much, but, the 10 to 15 inch range is probably about right. Now, the other side of it is up here across northeast Florida. This is, of course, the Duval County area and, the east coast of the Atlantic East Coast, and also here across the coastline of Georgia. This is another good pocket of 10 to 15 inches. So that's about the most that we're seeing. Now, the yellow and the orange, if you look at the key, because the key's right here, by the way, you've got maybe 4 to 6 or 6 to 10. So on the extreme end, you've got 4 to 10 inches. Yeah, and a little bit more if you're to the east, a little bit less if you're to the west. So we're in this area, in Tallahassee, Leon County. I think we're probably looking at somewhere between about 2 and 6 inches in total. Now, you could get some stronger thunderstorms. Some of these could be a little slower moving, so it could go on either side, but that's a pretty good range. 2 to 6 inches, I think, is pretty good. Deborah, how you guys doing? Are you planning on staying at the house with the animals, or have you figured out where else you're going to go at this point? I'm waiting for your response, too, by the way. All right, so here's winds. Now, the thing about this is tropical storm force wind probabilities. It's a probability. It's a probability. It's a chance of you getting at least 39-mile-an-hour winds, because that's what a tropical storm is. It goes from 39 to 73. All right, so here's the probability, and here's the key on the bottom. Lowest probabilities, the greens, and even the yellows, where you get the orange, a little higher probability, so maybe a 50 to 70% chance, and then, the red, the really deep red and the fuchsia. This is almost a done deal kind of thing. So pretty much the lower 2/3 of the peninsula, highest probability. And it should have been, almost a done deal at this point. So that's where all the winds are going to be. And of course, they're going to be strongest there. Now, we also are in a little bit higher probability. If the track shifts more west, we're going to increase the probability. If the track shifts more right to the east, we'll decrease the probability. But right now, we can't take chances. Right now, we're still, in a situation where we have prepared for the worst. Laura, I'm worried about Seminole County too. In fact, I'm worried about a lot of counties. And I think what's going to happen is, and I just got off the phone with my buddy Cindy, who's in the Bradenton area. It comes in, and as it's coming in, the rotation's counterclockwise. And so as all that happens, everything on the west coast of Florida is offshore. Now, that's not really the concern. And yeah, the winds are going to be strong, but the offshore flow is good. as the hurricane continues to move up toward the, north-northwest, then as it lifts north of these locations, the winds are going to reverse. Instead of moving offshore and coming down from the northeast, they're going to start to switch around and come in from a southwesterly direction, and that's going to be the onshore. That onshore is going to be the storm surge. And I appreciate all the really kind thoughts. And honestly, Alex, you know how I feel about you guys. Sydney, Tampa, St. Pete, I'm really concerned because of the bay. And not when it's, initially moving up, because again, there's that offshore flow. But once it starts to lift, maybe even toward the Gainesville area, as soon as the winds switch, you're going to have a buffeting effect, basically a northeasterly component, and then it's really going to come in strong. The only good news here, and I need you guys to remember this, it's moving pretty good. It's not Harvey, it's not that slow motion or that stationary pattern where we had all that excessive rain. This thing is moving. So if there's a saving grace, it is in the fact that it is moving, it's going to move in, it's going to do whatever is going to happen, and then it will move out. So at least we have that working for us. This is an advisory, a lot of words on here, but basically what it's saying is right now the center is 315 miles. 315 miles to the southeast of Miami. That's where it's located. So you start thinking about doing the math here, and you guys know this. I'm going to scroll to, let's see, we're going to go with the winds and when they're going to arrive. Here it is. So this is I've showed you guys this in a prettier version with all these colors, but now you get down and dirty. All right, so this is experimental. The Hurricane Center is using this for the first time this year. And so what they said is we can try to figure out when you're going to get, and here's what it says, the earliest reasonable arrival time of tropical storm force winds. All right, this is the earliest. The earliest across the extreme southern end of Florida. So this is really the Keys. The earliest is 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's the earliest. Of course, as the hurricane kind of keeps pushing north, west-northwest, and then it kind of starts that little bit of a turn, the winds are moving along with it. So look for those tropical storm force winds to also migrate to the north. Yarnell, I really don't want you in a mobile home. I do. I think you need to evacuate. And not because I want to scare you, but because anytime you're in something like a mobile home, air gets underneath. It's like being in a car. And if you get a strong gust of wind and the air gets underneath, you're going to have considerable damage. And I don't want you in it. So you have friends. You can spend money on a hotel if you've got it. I believe it's Expedia.com/Florida can really assist you with that. But call some friends in an anchored home and, at least go there. But the news here is you won't have to go tonight. In fact, you probably don't even need to go until Sunday morning, because watch how the winds move. They're moving up because the whole storm's moving up. So Saturday morning, we hit the southern end of the peninsula. That's where the winds start. Now, they have an intermediate point here, and you can see this. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday, it's really a thin area just south of, where my pen is, which is really Lake Okeechobee and south of there. So this is where the winds have started. Right? This is where we have the beginning. This is the earliest arrival. This is 2 o'clock Saturday afternoon. Now, by 8 p.m. Saturday, it is possible that the lower third of this peninsula, all of that may be experiencing those winds. If you started out with tropical storm winds, as is the case, of course, around the Keys and the southern end in this region, the winds are going to pick up. So you're going to start out with some weaker winds, but as this moves to the north, the intensity is going to change. And remember, right now we're still packing 155-mile-an-hour winds. There are gusts. So the gusts are going to be a little bit stronger than that. And, that's something that we have to anticipate as well. So then it hits middle of the state. Middle of the state, right across Tampa, below the Daytona area. But this is Sunday morning. So Sunday morning at 8 o'clock, we're working our way up the state. I'll get Jacksonville in a minute. Sunday morning, 8 o'clock, we've got winds for the lower half of the state. Okay, we're up here. And I know you're asking about Jacksonville, but we're almost in the same ballpark here. This is Sunday morning at 8. This is Sunday evening. Now, they're going to keep nudging, right? There are going to be some small changes where it looks like it's Sunday 8 here, and then it's down, or maybe it's a little farther north, but basically for us, not till Sunday will we feel the impact. So if this thing is moving up and it's only tropical storm force winds up through this area, the lower half of the state, this would be about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So later in the afternoon is when we may start to feel some of the winds. This is really about the earliest, and of course it could be later, and they're about the same over in Jacksonville. And again, it kind of depends on which way it's coming in. Let's go back to the chart here for a second. Which way is it coming in? Why is it steering, and why isn't it turning? So it's still coming in from this west direction at this point, but it's been overall, it's been a west-northwest. We were hoping for a turn. We were hoping that the turn would occur here or off the east coast of Florida, and as you see, it's not happening. There is a big area of high pressure. The air rotates clockwise. And what we were really anticipating is the hurricane would be in an area where this ridge would start to turn it. And so with that clockwise flow, it would start to lift it up and then perhaps turn it out to sea. But they're not really interacting with each other, so we're not getting that flow being steered in that general direction. So it's not really under that influence yet. Remember when we got cool and dry up here? Well, we had a cold front, and it came through, and then it kind of stalled out, became stationary, tilted over, and basically falling apart. So that's not really helping either. So a lot of times we're waiting for the other winds, like westerlies, to kind of carry it along. But at this point, we still think, and it's pretty good confidence because you don't see much of a wobble in this area, so really good accuracy in a short-term sense. As we're watching this through tomorrow, this is the center of where they believe Irma will be. This is 8 o'clock tonight. This should be 2 a.m. Sorry, I had to look for a second here. 2 a.m. and then 2 p.m. So there's a 12-hour time frame, but it almost looks like it's a crawl because it's not really, really far apart. Here's 2 o'clock Sunday morning. So that's the center, but remember, big system, 200 miles across. So you got clouds, you got a little bit of wind. The outskirts, not so much. Inside is where it's really tight. Then it pushes through the Keys, starts to push ashore, and then it kind of moves up. But again, once it starts having more of that drier air because it's moving across the land, I think what will happen then is we'll start to see the wind slow down. And again, the good news is, at least, and this is, they're holding steady at least. The last two advisories that they had the same thing. So we've gone from a major hurricane to what I would consider to be a pretty rapid weakening. There is a lot of land here, on the right side, so that's going to draw in some of that dry air, a little bit of friction. Now, the western side is still out over the Gulf, so that's not really going to, cause this to shrivel and weaken really rapidly. But considering what originally they had, which was a hurricane all the way up into Georgia, it's a good sign. So we'll keep watching it and hoping that they maintain that. But at this point, this is what we're looking at. Still pretty incredible that we've had this, major dangerous hurricane for so long, and we've been watching it for so long, and I think most of us are just exhausted. There were times today where I'm watching everybody do other things, and I'm thinking, am I doing enough? And honestly, that was a conversation I had with my buddy Cindy. We're looking at all this stuff, and I'm talking to her, and I'm going to flip this around here now for a second, and I said, we started prepping so early. It was last weekend, holiday weekend. We did everything. We started buying the supplies. We battened down the hat. We did all this stuff, and now we're waiting. And then we're waiting. And then we saw people doing this, or we saw people doing this, and we're like, oh, I have a little bit more time. Maybe I should be doing that. People are evacuating. Should I evacuate? I know Eric is on here, and the problem with evacuation now is too many people on the road at the same time. And I know you can't even imagine that it's a problem, but we call it over-evacuation. It started in 2004 when we had those really busy hurricane seasons, and we would really rather not have people that don't have to leave trying to evacuate and then having to endure the stress of trying to get on the road and trying to get to someplace safe. And the motto is, you run from the water, you hide from the wind. So if you're on the coast, we want you to evacuate. We really do. If you're in a mobile home, we want you to evacuate. Bye, Frank. We'll chat later. We want you to evacuate. But, if it's wind that we're being concerned about, then you batten down the hatches. This is where you do all the prep. We did the Ziploc thing today. Tomorrow we're going to wash dishes, wash laundry. You'll have clean clothes. You also have storage sites. And then because we have tomorrow, and we have, early half of the day on Sunday, let's say. But you have tomorrow, and I think tomorrow is the best day to go outside and bring everything in. Secure it all. So bring in your garbage can. Don't let anything that's outside have the possibility of floating or acting like a missile. I don't want to leave either. I'm hearing all the gridlock. I actually floated over Cap Circle. I didn't see a lot of traffic on our part of I-10, but I know intermittently it has been really, really busy. But at this point, take everything in. I have a garden room. We've got a patio set there, so there's a table and some chairs. We have hanging. It's all coming in. Everything's coming in. Don't worry about where you put it. You're not going to be entertaining. It doesn't matter that it's messy inside your house. I don't want to hear about you guys throwing it in a pool. I think it was something that we used to do. We used to do a lot of things that we admit were wrong. Just bring it in. Just protect it as best you can. And that, honestly, it's all you can do at this point. Do everything that you're supposed to do, and I know most of you have already done it. Do everything that you can do, and then I think at this point it's really a matter of hoping for the best. Alex says, so many people are seeing what happened with Harvey. You know what? It's a great question, Alex, and the difference is speed. What happened with Harvey is there was nothing to steer it or push it, so it had nothing to steer it, and it just sat there. And, coming in off the Gulf in its entirety. It came in off the Gulf. It sat there, and all it did was dump rain after rain after rain, and it was continuous, and it was heavy. And the saving grace for us is we have motion. Two things that Bob Sheets, who's an old director of the Hurricane Center, used to say: we like fast-moving hurricanes, and we like hurricanes that come at night. Yeah, stay with me on this one. The nighttime hurricanes, we don't have as much tendency to go outside and take a risk because it's dark and you can't see. If it's a daytime hurricane and you look outside and you see something, you might actually, run outside, and then something falls and it hits you. And so that's not something that, we really want you guys to be doing. Donnie, Jose is going to be just another one of these really dangerous hurricanes. And, I hate to say it, but, we had one, and we certainly now have two, and they're both really major hurricanes. The unfortunate side is steering currents haven't changed. So, yeah, there's a big high-pressure ridge here, but that's not really changing, which means the flow that was pushing Irma, however it was pushing it, is also going to be pushing Jose. So here's down and dirty for you guys. If you don't know, Jose's got 150-mile-an-hour winds. And, yeah, that makes it a Category 4 hurricane. And moving over a similar path that Irma did. And again, the problem, of course, is that the steering current is there. And, even if this thing didn't hit us the way we think it's going to hit us, you've got your supplies. And if you don't need it for this one, we're still in the middle of hurricane season. Because for the most part, this is the peak. September's the peak. They call it the deadliest month for hurricanes. But the real peak is typically August through October. So we're hitting it now. We're not going to end until the end of November. Michelle, let's see. Okay, Michael wants to know about Fort Myers. Fort Myers, early on, offshore. It's kind of like everybody else on the west coast of the state. With the counterclockwise turn, early on it's not terrible, but as the hurricane keeps moving, everything reverses. And once everything starts to move onshore, that's where you're going to see the flooding. The storm surge is going to be highest. And, of course, all this... That flooding at the coast is in addition to the rain and the wind that the hurricane is producing. So I couldn't give you numbers here. I couldn't tell you exactly how bad, but, on the west coast of Florida, most of you guys know it's pretty shallow, the continental shelf, and storm surges are always higher. On the Atlantic side, they're not as high typically, because on the Atlantic side, the shelf is a little bit deeper. And so there really is room for the water to move. So it does help to kind of decrease or lessen the impact there. But this thing is so close to the coastline and then coming in off the Gulf, there's great concern pretty much from Tampa all the way down. And that, of course, would mean that, we'd be looking at something really significant in terms of the water. Winds in Tallahassee, we got a couple of graphics here. That's not wind. This is the probability of tropical storm force winds. So we've got that. I think as to whether or not we get the hurricane force winds is really going to be based on, which side of this is it moving. Is it staying on course in this area? If it shifts a little bit more, we've got 100 miles of hurricane force winds. So a little bit of a nudge to the west, that's us. A little bit of a nudge to the east, that would be great for us, but not for everybody else. So it's going to wobble. And, that's the thing I can't emphasize enough. Even if you watch this is actual pictures of what it's been doing, you'll see a wobble, right? The eye doesn't look like it's moving in any true direction. It just, in fact, looks like it's skipping down. So expect the nudges, expect the wobbles. There are some small shifts that are going on. Are hurricane winds more significant if you live at a higher? Yes, Nisa. It's a really good question. Not necessarily the high elevation. I think that probably is minor, but you may have been hearing that if you are in, a multi-floor building, go to the lowest floor. So Rick Knapp, who's the director of the Hurricane Center, if you've been watching Weather Channel at all, you've been hearing him, and he's really been pushing some solid points home. If you're in a multi-floor building and you're on the 6th or 7th floor and you think, I'm up here, I'm good, because I'm not going to have to worry about storm surge. You're right. You don't have to worry about storm surge. But the winds higher up are stronger. No friction. So those wind speeds are going to be at least maybe 20 or so miles per hour stronger than what you would get at the surface. That's where you're going to slow it down. And so that can be a problem. And Rick went on to really push the point to try to motivate folks to leave. And he was saying, okay, so you survived the rise of water. Maybe you had the winds and maybe you were able to survive that, but everybody else left. And for somebody to help you, if they have to try to save you or get some supplies to you, they physically will be unable to. So the problem with taking a risk and staying where you're not supposed to stay is you're putting everybody else at risk. And I'm saying this, and this is a little bit of a soapbox today, but my husband's with LCSO. They're going to be on 12-hour shifts, 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And I remember in Hermine, he was up on Ox Bottom, and there was a guy, and his car had a tree fall right across the hood. And he said, sir, what was so important that you had to be on the road? And he said, my wife wanted coffee. I think we're all going to have to make some sacrifices, and even if it's just a cup of coffee, I think we're going to be okay. You can survive, or if you got to drink, whatever it is, we got to do it. But, we're really kind of trying to do this together. And I know it's uncomfortable. There's a lot of anxiousness. There's a lot of nervousness. I've heard a lot of people say that they're afraid. I don't want you to be afraid, especially once you have done everything that you're supposed to do. I think we're nervous because it's been so much time. And your mind is the worst thing sometimes when you have all this time, because you're wondering, did I do enough? Can I do more? At some point, you're going to have to say, I have done everything possible, and I'm going to have to trust that I have done everything that I can. And at this point, we're going to have to see what happens. I will tell you this, there are a couple of things that, these are just things that you should know. If it all comes tumbling down, and this is something we used to say always at the hurricane conferences, your method of last resort, let's say a tree falls into your roof, water's pouring in, and you're not sure what's going to happen. Your method of last resort, drag the mattress off the bed, get in the bathtub. So your mattress over your head in the bathtub. So the mattress stops debris from falling on you. The bathtub kind of stops things from coming in sideways, but you've got yourself a little bit of a shelter right there. And if the winds really start picking up, we want as many walls between the outside of your house and where you are. So if you can go to the most interior area, we very often, you guys hear this with like tornadoes, right? We say, go to the bathroom. Well, it's fine as long as there are no windows, because normally it's a little bit more solid. You might have the metal pipes around the room. Do everything you can. And honestly, at this point, that's all I'm suggesting. Do everything you can. We just, we got more to go here, and we haven't even started to get the hurricane at this point, and they're dealing with it in Cuba. Here's your satellite. The leading edge, here's the leading edge of the clouds. Here's the southern tip of Florida. It'll be a few hours, but it's coming ashore, right? You're going to start to see it. So here's the Keys. And what will happen is, because the whole thing's going like this, initially, and this would be the southeastern tip, right? Initially, the winds are going to come in from the northeast because of the way the hurricane's spinning. And then it'll keep pushing up. Then the winds will switch to more westerly. And then as it continues to move north, it'll switch around. But, as it first comes in, this is going to be the storm surge predicament for southeastern end of the peninsula. It's just a whole lot there. Why did Harvey park it? You know what, Robbie? It had nothing to help it. There was nothing to push it. If it were a week before, a week later, there were fronts, there were winds, there was all kinds of things. But this time of year, we don't have as much as what we get, in winter season. So you get the fronts, you get a jet stream, everything pushes, everything steers. But now the winds get more relaxed in the summer. Think about how calm it is and how still the air is, especially across the state. And so even in the latitudes here, you get light northeasterly trade winds overall. And so Harvey comes in, and then it just parked itself because there was nothing to help push it. It was unusual insofar as it sat for so long and it did absolutely nothing, and it just kind of dumped all that rainfall. But, you know, sometimes those things happen. We are not, but they anticipated that. And that was the thing you guys need to remember. You know, we don't have a lot of surprises here, but we knew this was going to happen. And even before Harvey hit, we had said that, you know, it's going to produce record rainfall amounts, and some areas could see higher than, 3 feet of rain. And, all that came out to be true. We're not going to see that here, and we know this as well. We know there's motion. We know there are steering currents. We know there's a big subtropical ridge of high pressure that'll push everything clockwise. And so that's the helping, to lift this more toward the north and then a little bit toward the northwest. Any chance Irma moves into the Gulf? Well, there's a chance of everything, but I think at this point that's really a limited chance. We're not convinced that's going to happen. We're more convinced it starts to lift more north. It could brush the extreme southeastern Gulf. It would be very dangerous, of course, if it hit the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, because that's where you could get a whole lot of, it's the loop current here. It's really where Katrina blew up. It's really where there's so much warm water, and it really maxed out in terms of the winds. But I don't think it's going to happen. I do think, and I'm pretty confident in this, that the next 24 and 36 hours, they're pretty good. They're solid in terms of the overall direction. It's going to keep moving this way. We have no doubt about that, honestly. And after that, there could be a migration either east or west. And that, for us is going to be how much we get. It's also going to be the same for the rest of the peninsula of Florida. So what about West Palm? Well, West Palm's dealing with a lot of stuff, and I know that there are mandatory evacuations down there. So anybody along the beach should have already left. You guys can say whatever you want. Honestly, you can. I'm going to tell you this. I have seen a lot of people in charge of the state and do a good or a weak job. I saw Jeb Bush do a fantastic job in 2004 and 5. I've not been the biggest supporter of Governor Scott, but I will tell you this. I think he has done everything and then some in terms of preparing the state. When he shut down the state offices, I thought, all right. And then you're hearing about all the resources. You're hearing about if you can't get out, you need transportation, call this. FloridaDisaster.org has it's a nice website, but it's got all the information that you guys want. If you're not sure, even at this point, that you should evacuate, you can actually type in your address, and they'll tell you what zone you're in or whether or not you're supposed to evacuate. I really am impressed with how much work everybody has done, and this is across the board. Everybody's kind of in it together. There have been times where things have been difficult in terms of supplies, and maybe it took you 2 efforts to get, whether it was water or gas or something like that. But the trucks are still coming in for us up here in the North Florida area. They will stop in Central and South Florida tomorrow. Hopefully you guys already have, all the supplies and things that you're going to need, because you're not going to be able to get resources tomorrow. So this is it. Us here in North Florida, we still have a little bit of time, but at this point, everything should have almost been completed. It's minor things, little things at this point. Everything, Sonia in South Florida, everything down there. The biggest impact is going to be on the southeast coast initially. So you see the red here, by the way, and I probably should point this out in case you weren't with us when we were talking about it. That's the hurricane warning. Red is a hurricane warning. Warning means 36 hours, you're going to get it. The pink is a watch, hurricane watch in the pink, and that's north of the red area, so that's up here around that little bit of a bend, but, basically from Tarpon Springs down to the Tampa Bay area, and then on the east coast as well. But this warning means hurricane conditions in 36 hours, the watch, possible in 48 hours. So the time frames are a little bit off, but, it's happening here, so they're getting those conditions. Outside it's a little less, and of course there's a little bit longer time frame for that to happen. I don't honestly know what I did. I told you guys I promised I would try to help you as best I could. This is all the 8 o'clock information. So as you know, we've been watching the time here. Every 3 hours we're getting the advisories. We're at 10:16, and at 10:16, we're still waiting on the next advisory, which will come at 11 o'clock. So we have 2, 5, 8, 11, and it's both AM and PM. This was the advisory from 8 o'clock tonight. In about less than an hour, we'll have the 11 o'clock advisory. The graphics have been a little bit slow, but you can't even imagine how many hits the Hurricane Center's website's been taking, but it'll be there. And I think we, as we keep seeing this, and this is the message, if it's a consistent track, we're not deviating, we're not wobbling, we're pretty confident. We're not absolutely sure, but we're pretty confident this is what it's going to do. So right now for us in Tallahassee, we're looking at, maybe maximum 4 to 6 inches of rain. We're looking at tropical storm force winds, perhaps by afternoon, maybe a little bit later on Sunday. So we have all day tomorrow, and we also have morning hours and perhaps early afternoon on Sunday to finish up, do whatever it is that you guys are doing. And at this point, honestly, I think relax. I want to tell you guys to go have a good meal tomorrow night, just in case our power goes out and then it's the last hot meal you guys get to have for a really long time. EM Director, I have a hard time getting thoughts on another west shift. Try not to anticipate another shift, Sean. I'm concerned about, seeing something and everybody going for it. And the only reason we're seeing a migration that seems to be now a little bit more toward the west is it's been consistent. We've seen the advisories, it's on 24 hours now. All the advisories, took that little bit of a turn. And, my experience tells me that within 3 days, that's usually what happens. They go for it, they'll go back and forth, and it's a larger area in the long term. And then as we get closer, within the 3 days, they do a left shift. So they may, adjust the track a little bit more toward the west. And then just about the time it's coming in, making landfall, I normally see a little bit of a right adjustment, so a little bit more toward the east. So they've got it within the cone. And I'm confident in that, and I'm really comfortable in telling you that the Hurricane Center has done a good job, and they're looking at everything they possibly can to make sure that we all have that really good information. All right, so let's all take a break. We'll do one more, because there's an 11 o'clock, and I think we all need to get a little bit of sleep. And I want to go take a shower at this point. I appreciate all you guys kind of tuning in and trying to get as much information as possible. And, that's all we can do. We're prepared. We have all the information, and then we make our decisions based on it. So toodles for now, and we'll see you in a little bit. Okay? All right. Bye.